Welcome back to the deep dive. Some celebrity memoirs, they feel a bit, well, obligatory, don't they? Like just kicking a box, maybe rehashing old news.
Yeah, just a quick skim over the headlines we already know.
Exactly. But today, we're diving into something completely different. A book that really pushes back against that expectation. We're
Where?
taking a really close look into the life and maybe more importantly, the mind of Gucci Mane through his memoir episodes. And it is raw.
It really is an extraordinary piece of work. And our mission today, well, it's sort of twofold, isn't it?
Go on.
First, you absolutely have to grapple with the content itself. I mean, the severe mental health issues, the addiction, the just brutal reality of his transformation.
Right, the personal story.
But second, and this is key for a proper deep dive, we're dissecting the process. How do you even make a book like this?
Okay, so behind the scenes.
Exactly. We're looking into that specific, often kind of hidden craft of turning a superstar's life, which was chaotic, fragmented, sometimes, blurred by drugs, into a story that feels compelling, coherent, and actually authentic.
And that difference between the life lived and the crafting of the story about that life, that's really the hook here, I think.
Definitely.
Gucci Mane, the artist, I mean, he's an icon.
Yeah.
Atlanta rap pioneer, known for, myth making in his music, right? Prolific output.
Huge influence. Trailblazer.
But our source material today, and we're leaning heavily on insights from his co-writer, Kathy Andoli, who's just masterful. It shows this stark, almost life or death contrast.
Between what?
Between that public persona, built on party anthems and this massive bravado, and the private reality, which was just agonizing.
And Ina Doley is absolutely the key to unlocking that. She's kind of the go-to for these really high-stakes hip-hop autobiographies.
She's done quite a few, hasn't she?
Oh, yeah. Prodigy, T-Pain, Eve, Lil' Kim. She's worked with giants. So we're going to use her perspective, her insights, to understand the, frankly, agonizing process needed here.
How do you shape that raw, sometimes traumatic experience into a structure, into a narrative?
Exactly. And one that focuses on regret, reflection, and maybe most importantly, this kind of radical intellectual honesty.
What's really fascinating, and you mentioned structure, is how the book itself, its architecture, seems designed, almost weaponized, to show that psychological damage.
It really is. It takes it way beyond just a typical celebrity tell-all. It feels more like, profound psychological documentation of part.
Okay, so let's start there with that contradiction. Go back maybe 15 years ago, his initial big run.
Right.
The music he was known for then. It wasn't just popular, it felt like it was everywhere. Culturally seismic, almost. And it was all geared towards, hedonism, right? Recklessness, partying.
Yeah, that whole era of trap music, it had this almost manic energy, and Gucci was right at the heart of it. His songs felt engineered, like they were built to sound like a never-ending Saturday night.
The track Wasted, that's the prime example, isn't it?
Absolutely quintessential. The lyrics were just pure escapism. Party, 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 let's all get wasted.
Yeah.
I mean, that line defined a whole cultural moment where chasing oblivion was kind of the aesthetic.
But, if you listen closely, even back then, the drug use isn't just hinted at, it's often the main subject. And it's framed as, glamorous almost. Like that line, purple codeine, Sprite pink, don't waste it. You realize the whole foundation of this party persona, it was rooted in genuine, pretty intense drug use, not just casual fun.
And that's where the tragedy really lies, isn't it? And it's where the memoir is just so effective at, stripping away that facade.
How so?
While he was making and promoting these anthems, telling everyone to get wasted, the private reality was, he says it himself, he was not having a good time.
Wow. That's quite an irony.
It's almost perfectly tragic, right? This high-energy, reckless image wasn't built on being carefree. It was built on intense, debilitating depression, cycles of mania, overwhelming anxiety, and just deep spiraling drug dependency.
I have to pause there, though. Was the music itself like a reflection of that mania? Or was it more conscious, like channeling the pain into something that would sell, which then just kept the cycle going?
That's a great question. And Andoli's insights, they suggest it was probably a mix of both. But the lifestyle definitely demanded he keep up the image, right?
Yeah, you can see that.
The artist couldn't really show the suffering because it just ran completely counter to the myth he was building, and frankly, what the industry wanted from a party icon back then.
So the memoir forces you, the reader, to look back at those old tracks with completely new eyes. Much darker eyes.
Exactly. It reveals the persona was, in many ways, just a coping mechanism for suffering that was just getting worse and worse.
Okay, let's jump forward then. Fast forward dramatically to 2016. This is the moment, I think, when the public really saw this transformation story solidify.
Oh yeah, released from prison.
And the difference was just astonishing, wasn't it?
It was a shocking public reinvention. He came out looking visibly slimmer, incredibly healthy, talking openly about eating well, this whole health-conscious vibe.
And then professionally, things took off immediately.
Instantly. Platinum album, everybody looking. And then the ultimate kind of mainstream stamp of approval, becoming the face of a global campaign for Gucci, the designer that partly inspired his name. Huge.
He basically became the ultimate redemption story. The message seemed crystal clear. Discipline, focus, sobriety, they lead to success.
And that was the public story. And look, in many ways it was true. He did achieve massive success, and the physical change was real. But the source material, the memoir, clarifies this really crucial, often overlooked point. Even during that seemingly triumphant time, he was still hiding some of his darkest struggles from the world. The fight for mental health, it's not like a switch you flip. It's an ongoing process, right?
But why hide it then? If he was already reinventing himself, wouldn't being transparent about the ongoing mental health battle have actually fit his new, sort of more mature brand?
I think he speaks to the enormous pressure. The pressure of maintaining that new, carefully crafted image after years of public chaos, legal trouble. The need to project total control, health, focus must have been just immense.
Right. The triumph narrative doesn't leave much room for vulnerability.
Especially not in an industry that, let's be honest, often penalizes visible weakness.
And that brings us right to how Episodes, the book, actually came about. Because he didn't originally set out to write this big literary memoir, did he?
No, not at all. The intent shifted quite dramatically.
What was the first idea?
The initial goal was much smaller, more practical. Untold mentions it started simply as an idea for a mental health handbook. Like a survival guide he could literally hand out to other artists.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, artists in the industry dealing with the same stuff, anxiety, depression, addiction. It was meant to be very clinical, almost a how-to guide.
I can see the logic there. That each one teach one idea, right? Solve an immediate problem within the community. Give people tangible advice.
Definitely. But was that really enough to capture the sheer depth of his experience? Probably not.
So Untold played a role in changing direction.
She was instrumental, it seems, in pivoting away from that purely didactic structure. Because look, a handbook gives you quick tips, right?
Yeah.
But it fundamentally lacks the narrative power you need to convey deep, complex trauma and, crucially, empathy.
It doesn't tell the story.
Exactly. They realized through their conversations that the story was just, as she put it, much bigger than a how-to. It went way beyond simple advice.
So to really communicate the weight of it all, the context for the self-destruction, he needed the full story.
Precisely. The full, comprehensive life story, that was the realization. Only through that full narrative could he give context to the chaos, and in doing so, maybe turn his unique trauma into something more universal. He eventually felt, as the sources say, called to do this as a proper memoir.
It signals a shift then, from just providing information to actually committing to profound vulnerability.
Absolutely, because the context, the why behind the actions, the specific triggers, the devastating consequences, that's everything when you're talking honestly about addiction and mental health. The narrative gives you the emotional scaffolding that, a bullet point list just never could.
Okay, so let's talk about that structure Untold helped shape. The title itself, Episodes. It's not just catchy marketing, is it? It feels like the whole intellectual framework.
Oh, it's brilliant. It really is a brilliant structural device. By calling each section an episode, they frame his life not as this smooth, linear progression, but as a series of intense, often discrete psychological or even physiological experiences.
So the reader might remember the event, the headline, the court date, the album drop.
Right, the public stuff. But now Gucci provides the critical background. He tells you where he was mentally when all that was happening.
That completely shifts the focus, doesn't it? It moves it from what did he do to something more like what was actually happening to him.
Precisely. It reframes everything through that internal lens.
So what are some of the key psychological things that the book reveals for the first time using the structure?
Well, the level of vulnerability is just.
Yeah.
It's unprecedented for an artist of his stature, really. He talks about the full extent of his mental anguish, the pitfalls, and the triggers no one speaks about.
Like what specifically?
For instance, he goes deep into really personal drivers. He details how his fascination with money, which was intense, almost pathological how it got the worst of him.
Right.
He gives insight into the exact mental state that led to certain crimes, not trying to justify them, but explaining the context, the triggers.
And even that famous ice cream cone tattoo, the most mythologized part of his image, maybe.
Even that gets a proper explanation. The memoir shows that even that incredibly visible, iconic symbol has deep personal context tied to his mentality back then.
Wow.
But maybe the most harrowing detail, the one that really connects his addiction to his personal life, is the description of his wife watching him overdose.
Jeez. That is... Yeah, that's an extreme level of vulnerability. It really forces you, the reader, to confront the real human cost, not just the celebrity drama.
It's completely unflinching, and the memoir uses that intimacy, I think very deliberately, to hammer home the point that addiction isn't just about the user, it affects everyone around them.
It's a family disease, as they say.
Exactly. By including her perspective, the person who witnessed the near-fatal consequences, he immediately grounds the whole story in this high-stakes reality. It feels like a conscious choice to ensure the book serves a therapeutic purpose, too, maybe showing others struggling what their loved ones go through.
Speaking of costs and consequences, let's talk about accountability. That's huge here. Gucci really confronts the heavy burden of having helped make drug use seem, well, cool in hip-hop culture.
Yeah, that requires immense intellectual honesty, doesn't it?
Totally.
And it's a real watershed moment in the book. He shares this major epiphany he had, recognized that he played a part in popularizing making drug abuse kind of cool.
Does he give examples?
Oh yeah, he cites specific lyrics, like from his track Pills, where he's rapping explicitly about being off 3 double stacks. He's not just vaguely confessing, he's owning the actual social impact of his art.
That level of self-critique is pretty rare, especially for really successful artists. It means looking back and saying, hey, this thing I made that made me millions and got me praise, it also did some harm.
It's powerful, and Iandoli observed this change firsthand.
Yeah.
She noted how compelling it was seeing the Gucci of years later, just looking at this stuff and just being like, wow.
Like seeing it fresh.
Exactly. That reflective, retrospective viewpoint is the engine driving the whole memoir. It turns the book into this kind of dialogue between the current sober, reflective man and his past chaotic self.
What's really interesting, too, is how that raw truth came out during the writing process. You mentioned this therapy parallel, that the big insights often came after the formal interviews.
Yeah, that was fascinating. Iandoli compared it directly to when a patient leaves a therapy session and then suddenly everything starts to pour out afterwards. It seems the formal interview process, which is structured, maybe demands chronology, it acts like a narrative trigger. It loosens the mental block somehow.
So the deeper stuff surfaces later.
Yeah, the deeper self-critical truths, the real regret, the genuine shame, they surfaced more organically once the pressure of the recording session was off, maybe via text message or a follow-up call. The interview was the catalyst. The private follow-up was the raw data.
That struggle with memory, with chronology, it leads us perfectly to the book, the most innovative structural thing, the literal blacked out pages. That's central to showing the mental damage, right?
Absolutely central. This is where episodes just fundamentally breaks from your standard memoir format. The book actually features pages that are deliberately, literally blacked out, like solid black.
Wow, that's not just style, is it?
Not at all. It's a total commitment to narrative truth-telling about the physical reality of what severe drug abuse and dissociation could do to your brain, to your memory.
It's kind of a genius way to show the psychological experience of those memory gaps, the trauma, without trying to, like, invent words to fill them in. You're just showing the absence.
Precisely. It visually lays out for you, the reader, what it's genuinely like when your brain is absolutely on fire, as they put it. It shows the reality of memory gaps, what Iandoli calls the blanks in memory.
Right. If he can't remember a period because he blacked out or was in an extreme manic state, why make something up?
Exactly. Why invent it? The black page serves as this direct physical representation of a gap in his self-awareness. It asks the reader to just acknowledge the missing time, not smooth over it like most narratives do.
I can't think of seeing that as celebrity memoir before. It kind of validates that suspicion we all have that these lives aren't always neat, easily recalled stories.
It brings an intellectual honesty that, frankly, conventional memoirs often just avoid. Most celebrity books polish the past, right? They minimize the blank spots. Episodes does the opposite. It monumentalizes the missing information. It turns the memory gap itself into a crucial narrative event.
It forces you to understand that this chaotic life literally led to sections of his own history being erased from his memory.
Yeah. Powerful stuff.
And the structural honesty, it feeds right into the book's bigger mission, doesn't it? This feels like it's intended to cultivate a much wider conversation.
Oh, absolutely. Gucci Mane is clearly trying to move beyond that traditional each one, teach one model
Yeah.
where you only discuss mental illness behind closed doors, quietly.
He wants to bring it out in the open.
He aims to cultivate a public discourse, specifically in a culture, rap, and hip-hop that, look, it's getting better, but it still absolutely stigmatizes public discussions around the topic.
Yeah, that stigma is huge, especially maybe among young men in the culture who feel like admitting vulnerability is admitting weakness. That's probably the biggest barrier to getting help.
Totally. So by using his massive fame as, like, a wrecking ball against that barrier, he's leveraging his platform for genuine societal good. It's impressive.
And critically, it's not just his personal story, right? The book brings in outside voices.
That's key. It integrates actual expertise. The memoir includes interviews with medical professionals, with mental health experts, to provide more insight and awareness.
So it blends the personal with the clinical.
Exactly. It blends that raw, subjective experience with objective, clinical understanding. And that creates this document that feels both emotionally powerful and genuinely informative. It's clearly an attempt to leave a lasting legacy on mental health conversations, not just on music.
Okay, the story itself is incredible, but the sheer effort involved administratively, psychologically, to take a life that dramatic, full of those blacked out gaps, and somehow shape it into the logical, structured book we've been talking about. That's where Kathy Iandoli's craft really shines, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Iandoli is a much more than just a ghostwriter here. She's like a narrative architect.
Right.
And her deep experience in hip-hop culture means she gets the specific language, the high-stakes world, and maybe that defensive posture artists often bring to these kinds of projects.
So she can bypass the usual PR defenses.
I think she's uniquely positioned to do that, yeah. She understands the landscape.
How quick was this process? Because given the depth, the need for accuracy, it sounds like it must have been a really intense collaboration.
Apparently, it was incredibly fast. Iandoli confirmed the actual writing happened in a very short amount of time. Once the publisher said yes, it was just go time.
So Gucci knew what he wanted to say.
It sounds like Gucci knew the emotional beats, the thematic points he absolutely needed to hit. But he needed Iandoli to organize it all. Her main role seems to have been to fill in some of the blanks in the how.
How to connect the dots.
Yeah. How to make all these disparate, chaotic events feel like a seamless story when, as she described it, the life itself had been bursting at the seams for years.
Wow. Bursting at the seams. That's such a powerful image. It sounds like trying to put back together a dropped roll of film, you know? You have the start and end points, but a lot of the critical bits are jumbled or just missing.
That's a perfect analogy. You've got these key anchor moments. Everyone knows a song release, a court date, that big physical transformation. And Iandoli seems to use those anchors to kind of chronologically arrange the emotional context that Gucci was finally ready and able to provide. She filled in the connective tissue between the traumas.
But imposing order on chaotic memory must be so hard. And it requires confronting the artist, right? Especially on this issue of total honesty. Which brings us to what you call Iandoli's authenticity test.
Yeah, this seems absolutely core to her method. Her necessary, maybe even confrontational opening question to artists you might work with, even the huge stars with massive book deals, is basically, are we writing a work of fiction?
Straight out of the gate.
Straight out of, she forces them to be intellectually honest right away. She makes it clear, okay, we can call the book a memoir publicly, but internally, between us, we need to know. Are we committed to the truth, or are we just managing your brand here?
That sets the stakes immediately, doesn't it? If the book is just meant to be like a strategic PR move, Iandoli knows she's playing a completely different game.
Exactly. And then, when artists inevitably say the right things, oh yeah, I want to be raw, uncut, which is the phrase they all use apparently.
Of course.
But then they start holding back, maybe deflecting from the really painful bits. She pushes them again. She challenges them directly. Okay, where do you want to go from here? Do you want to make this a work of fiction, or do you actually want to let it all out? She's essentially forcing them to recommit to the vulnerability they promised at the start.
But hold on, how does she make sure that the context Gucci provides isn't just making excuses for past bad behavior? How does she keep that critical distance while still capturing his voice?
Yeah, that's the real tightrope walk for a co-writer, isn't it? I think of that framing mechanism, the episode structure, is key again here.
Oh, so?
By explicitly stating where he was mentally during those times, the book isn't excusing the crime or the behavior, but it's explaining the mental instability that contributed to it. Iandoli's job, it seems, is to ensure that the voice of the reflective, sober, present-day Gucci holds the past, chaotic Gucci accountable.
So the narrative stays critical and focused on growth, not just deflection.
That seems to be the goal, yeah.
Yeah.
Maintaining that balance.
What about the boundary of oversharing, though? With huge money potentially on the line and this cultural pressure for total transparency, does Ian Doley ever respect an artist's right to just keep something private?
Oh, absolutely. That boundary seems fundamental to her integrity, actually.
Yeah.
She respects that the artist does not have to overshare.
Really? Even with a big advance?
Yeah. She explicitly says the goal isn't total public exposure for its own sake. The goal is honesty relevant to the journey being told. She seems to understand that not everyone has to know everything, even despite what social media conditions us to believe. Even with a huge advance putting pressure on them, she helps the artist reserve some things just for themselves. Ironically, maybe true honesty actually requires protecting some boundaries.
That's a really profound point, especially today with constant digital confession being the norm. Okay, let's pivot slightly to motivation. Why write a book like this today? Physical books aren't usually the main moneymaker for global stars anymore. So what's the real reason for investing this kind of massive emotional and time commitment? Is it, as you hinted, TMZ or TED Talk?
That dichotomy, TMZ or TED Talk, that's Ian Doley's crucial diagnostic question right at the start, in those initial meetings. It basically determines her entire narrative strategy.
How does she explain the difference?
Well, she acknowledges that some artists, frankly, just see a book as another product line, an extension of their brand, like you launch a clothing line or a fragrance or their own vodka.
Like check the box.
Yeah, just another thing to sell. And those, she believes, are often the artists who are not ready to write their books in a meaningful way.
Because they'll just focus on the external drama, the stuff that gets headlines.
Exactly. A TMZ approach book would focus almost exclusively on, like, feuds, maybe shocking anecdotes taken out of context. Sensationalism purely designed to generate clicks and controversy. The focus is all external.
But for serious artists, like the reflective Gucci Mane we're seeing in episodes, the book serves a completely different purpose, right?
Totally different. For them, the book isn't seen as some kind of end of a career marker. It's not like writing your own tombstone inscription.
It's not a wrap-up.
No. It functions more as an excellent midway mark and a reflection. It's a pivot point. The intense process of introspection helps them synthesize all that past chaos into actual lessons, maybe some transferable wisdom. And they can use that clarity for whatever's next, creatively or personally.
Like cleaning house mentally before the next chapter.
That's a great way to put it. So Ian Doley's ultimate litmus test, do you want this book to lead to TMZ or TED Talk, tells her immediately which writer thinking cap, as she says, she needs to put on.
And Episodes was clearly aiming for the TED Talk side of things.
Oh, unquestionably. Episodes is the absolute definition of the TED Talk goal. It sought to pull wisdom out of chaos, use that immense celebrity power to drive a vital public health conversation, and ultimately use narrative structure and innovation like those blacked out pages, like including expert interviews to set a new, much higher bar for genuine vulnerability in celebrity memoirs.
It's about making meaning, not just reinforcing the myth.
Exactly. Meaning making over myth making. Hashtag tag outro.
So this deep dive, it's really laid bare the immense effort involved, hasn't it? Both psychological and architectural. Taking a life filled with such contradictions, such fragmented memory, a life that was, as Ian Doley said, bursting at the seams and shaping it into something cohesive, something therapeutic, something culturally essential, really.
It really has.
The power of Episodes, I think, lies in that successful shift, moving beyond just documenting the sensational stuff to actually creating profound meaning from it.
It's an incredibly complex document when you think about it that way. It's working on multiple levels at once. It's a deeply personal, creative work, yes, but it's also functioning as this vital public health tool.
Yeah.
Episodes gives you this unflinching account of a man who faced absolutely crippling mental health crises, severe addiction, defied all the odds stacked against him, and then consciously used his platform to try and leave a lasting legacy.
And not just on music or culture?
No, specifically on normalizing these crucial conversations around mental health awareness, particularly within the hip-hop community where it's been so stigmatized.
Okay, so we'll leave you, the listener, with this final thought to chew on. Consider that critical difference between the myth-making that's often inherent in an artist's music, where, let's face it, emotional honesty might be secondary if the track works, if it sells, and the mandatory vulnerability that a truly serious memoir like this demands. Does the structure of episodes, with those visual gaps acknowledging real memory loss and its integration of outside medical expertise, does that create a necessary new standard? A new benchmark for how celebrity trauma is documented and shared responsibly?
Has Gucci Mane, through this book, essentially evolved the celebrity tell-all into something that actually doubles as a public health service?
It definitely raises the bar beyond just simple confession, doesn't it? It transforms the memoir into something more like a documented recovery process.
Absolutely. Something to think about the next time you encounter one of these celebrity stories built around transformation. How deep does it really go?
That's it for this deep dive. Thanks for tuning in.